Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, so, welcome to The First Turn. I am Hyena.
I'm Llama. Still.
Today, we're talking about Warhammer. We're talking about Age of Sigmar. We're talking about the coming out of 4th edition. I think in the next coming weeks we'll have a little more information about the new season of 40k. So expect that as we get some empirical data about the new season.
We've liked what we've seen.
Yes.
Big
improvements.
Even though 40k hasn't been our focus.
Kind of like soft balancing in terms of like getting armies to build differently.
Yep.
You know, battle line is a big, very important unit.
Shaking
type.
it up. You know what's funny is we have talked for years about how they might not even necessarily have to launch new editions.
Right. Yeah.
This
exactly.
seasonal mode would be a way for them to shake up the game, give every army a refresh, and now they can't help themselves.
A new edition can just be changes to the rules proper, right? As long as you're not changing the rules entirely, you don't need to change editions. We could do like a 4 or 5 year rotation without a rules edition. You know, call it that.
And they haven't let us really have a quote mature edition where, hey, every army's out, now let them play.
Right.
Instead, what they do is this like throwaway chapter approved the last 3 months.
Yep.
That sort of says WTF, and that's not what we mean. It's like you've got every army out, you've gone through all these balance passes. Give them a full season. Give them one of those chapter-approved launches where it's like, here's the last points balance, here's the last mission objectives.
Yep.
Play for 6 months with every army being
You can throw out some models.
Yep.
But don't give us a new codex.
Yeah.
Unless it's like tweaking the existing one. You know.
This season so far is going to be one of the largest mid-edition, I guess we're still in the early part of the edition, first year updates I think we've seen.
Right.
Because they're giving at least one army a full respec because their codex just didn't land.
Yep.
And they thankfully decided not to let it die to come back another day.
Yep.
They're giving us another points pass. We haven't seen that yet. And some major FAQ stuff, which we also haven't seen. We've only seen like the seasonal changes to objectives and stuff like that, which is fine. But we've liked those things that we've seen.
Right.
Even if there was a single whoops in that there was something involving destroying a unit of 20 or more models and how that can be exploited already, I guess.
I feel like it's really easy to fix something like that by saying destroying a unit of 11 to 20 models. Then there's no reason not to bring 20.
Yeah.
You know, it's that kind of thing. Destroying a unit of up to 20, I don't know.
Well,
however you want to do it.
It's also ticky-tack, and I mean that as far as the community goes.
Right.
Because the first thing they do in anything that comes out is they look for that. What's the improper use of grammar? What's the misword? What's the oops? That we can then make it seem like, look, this whole balance pass is worthless. Let's not talk about anything we're gaining or anything that's being fixed. Let's bugger on this one thing that you know they're going to probably FAQ immediately.
And so, yes, so this new season, it feels very, very... It feels like a very big game refresh.
It does.
So that'll at least make it feel nice, new, and shiny, and maybe bring people back to it. Because I know a lot of folks have kind of cooled off on this edition, because it does get a little stagnant when it's like, you know, only a certain percentage of stuff is even playable, you know.
Well, yeah, and even when you had a variety of armies winning, I think there was becoming less and less variety within each army.
Right.
And not even because they were, quote, solved, but people just weren't moving off of it. And I don't think GW's trying to... The idea that they're out to get the players, to screw the players, that doesn't obviously help them, so they wouldn't do that.
I mean, maybe a little bit of driving sales by making
absolutely.
things good. You know.
But now you will have to re-look at list building.
Right.
At least a little bit. Obviously, some of the big things that were becoming popular that are good at wiping out units of infantry will remain, but some things weren't that.
Right.
I mean, that U.S. Open in Dallas was won by a Tyranid list running 120 Termagants, plus Harmagons, plus Neurogons, plus Gargoyles, and it's because every army running their low shot count, high strength, high AP, high damage doesn't do anything against that. Like, it's just you can't kill enough of them. And it's not fun to transport an army that large, and you have to be really good to pilot an army that large, but showed it can be done. It was a great meta call. I don't think the whole format will switch to that, but there's now an incentive to play Battle Line.
Absolutely. It's a new way to build your army.
Yep.
To do well in, the objective game.
It can randomly bring forth armies that weren't getting much play, and it can randomly check armies that were overrepresented. I
mean, I could absolutely see something like, again, this is one of the nerfs that, quote unquote nerfs, you call them, right? Rebalancing. Yep. That Flesh Eater, no, wrong game. Gene Stealer cults received because their book is being decreed as
Dead on
Arrival.
Yep.
It's horrible. It's the worst nerf they've ever done. They've nerfed the most underplayed, underperforming army is already nerfed. Well, it was rebalanced, sure. We don't know what the points look like.
Nope.
Okay, that's a big part of it. And in addition, where infantry and battle line are very, very important, Gene Stealer cults has a lot of that. Recurring ones, even.
Yeah.
And so, the strategy of, well, I'll just destroy all my enemies' battle line units and then they can't do their secondaries, that might not work for them because so many of their units could be battle line that they can recur them and bring them back. And those battle line units, which should still be battle line when they're brought back from the dead, should be able to accomplish those missions.
And we talk about this a lot. There's like a fallacy, a logical fallacy that people leap to. They do this every time. They see new rules being proposed for an army or leaked for an army that's coming out, or even full-blown shown because the book's out next week or whatever. And they'll look at the rule for it. They'll assume the points cost are going to stay exactly as they are.
Right.
They go, well, but if that thing is still this many points per model, then that's just a straight nerf. It's like, well, we don't know what they cost yet. So, or you've seen it where people attempt to play trying out new versions of rules mixed with old. And that makes no sense to me.
It drives me so nuts. We saw a little bit of that with the 4th edition 40K. No, of AOS, where we had a friend who was trying to learn the game for the first time. And they were being shown the game, and they're like, oh, well, the next edition, we know this rule is already going to be a thing, so we'll use that. And it's like, no.
No, because it doesn't work with AOS 3.
That's not how the current version of AOS 3 doesn't keep that in mind when it designs its rules. Don't mix edition rules like that. Unless it was like a house rule, but then
if you're just playing for funsies,
then
whatever,
it's so unofficial, and you can't even say, like, this is the game anymore.
Right.
So, don't do that.
But we do see that. We've seen it when leaks for a codex start coming out weeks ahead.
Yep.
Someone will see a single stratagem, a single unit, and then they'll like,
well, I'm going to use that stratagem in this game.
I'm going to use that stratagem, or they'll say, well, this unit's now bad because if it still costs 380 points, then now it does less than what it did. It's like, we have no idea. You don't have all the context. I don't know. So anyway, it could cause things to change quite a bit. Because like you pointed out with Gene Stealer cults, that's really all they have. They've got 2 trucks and they've got all infantry, really.
Right. Some bikes and some buggies and stuff, but most of the army is going to be infantry.
Yeah, lightweight vehicles and infantry.
Yeah.
And so they could end up benefiting despite what appear at the onset to be nerfs.
Right. So, but regardless of that, we'll talk about that later, more in depth
when
we see more of it. We have the 2 books coming out for them as well for 40K. Both the Gene Stealer cults plus Sororitas. So that'll be interesting to see how they go, because Sororitas are very strong right now. Yep. We'll see if they remain strong.
In fact, for the last couple of years, they're just rarely in a bad spot.
I could see them being the same kind of beneficial changes with the new season. Them benefiting a lot. So we'll see how that goes. But AOS 3.0, 4.0, 4.0 even.
4.
We've seen a handful more of the faction previews this week, which I think were phenomenal. I liked them all.
Yep.
It does mean that next week we are overloading with stuff, right? Slaves of Darkness is one of those things that's like, man, I really, really want to see what they have.
And we haven't seen it yet.
That's the one I kind of want to see the most.
We've got a buddy who hasn't played in a while who wants to see the Khorne one, and we haven't seen it yet.
So we got Khorne coming, we got Ironjaws, another one of my armies we haven't seen yet.
Which confirmed your suspicion. When they announced Bone Splitters going back to Old World, it's like, well, then the big WoG concept of Greenskins is gone, right? Because there's no more 3 armies. And they showed off Cruel Boys today, and they were all by themselves.
Which looked ridiculously good, by the way.
They look very good.
They look so good.
Yeah.
I was a little irritated, confused, concerned. All those that the war boss on Nash Tooth. So a partially clothed orc riding a partially armored Swamp Dog did have a 3-up save. That was a little...
But Abraxia currently has a 4.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So I'm going to lose my fucking mind if Abraxia comes out and she's got a 4-up save. It's like, I thought you guys said you spread all the models out on the table and you compared them to one another and you wrote rules for them based on their appearances. They should have an appearance. I'm sorry, but a Swamp Orc with a shield should at most have a 4-up save. 3-up is that's absurd. That's absurd. So you're telling me that a Stormcast Eternal riding a dragon in full plate armor has the same save as this guy?
Right.
That's absurd. Come on.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Side note, on the hobby side, I first poo-pooed on the studio paint scheme for Abraxia.
Okay.
Because her mount looks so olive green, and they did nothing to variate it. They didn't even like shade it. Mm-hmm. They didn't do anything to two-tone it. Nothing. But then I thought about it for a second. It's actually a pretty complicated model. For one, it's proper facing as a profile instead of head-on. Because while the head of the mount and the head of Abraxia both face you, the model is sideways, right? You also want Abraxia to be the spotlight, the character herself. And so if you paint the dragon in a wild variation of tones, you could lose focus on her. The studio, however, failed to do either. So they made the dragon drab, which if you're going to do that, you then have to make her pop.
Right.
They didn't. They just black.
Yeah.
With true metallic gold trim.
So you're saying that they failed in what they were trying to avoid doing.
Right.
They failed to bring the focus to her anyway.
And so then her model is just altogether muted. Okay. Like, and if you're going to go bright on the dragon, because why not? You've got scales, you've got horns, you've got teeth, you've got lots of musculature. Well, then you have to make her that. Like, go all in. Then punch her up. She has to be dynamic. They failed to do it with either, mount or rider, which is a little unfortunate. Yeah. And yet the model still, it looks so much better in person.
And damn it, she better have a 3-up save.
And she better
all I'm saying.
Have a 3+ save.
God damn.
We know she'll have the Chaos Rune Shield that deflects mortal wounds or whatever, but
she just have 3-up save.
Give her a 3-up save.
That needs to be all slaves though. Anything heavy armor, Chaos Warrior should have a 3-up save or better. Not bad. Don't say better. Yeah. You should have a 3-up save.
3+. Yeah. And that's and I think that could be one of the standards for that army.
Sure.
Right? They've shown
it's the sick mirror of Stormcast, which they've already showed.
Correct.
Liberators have a 3-up save.
Yeah.
Liberators with double weapons and great weapons, 3-up save.
And aesthetically, you and I talked about how they've advanced the Slaves to Darkness or Warriors of Chaos aesthetic. Whereas in 40K, the Chaos parody Space Marines, they've now leaned into that aesthetic, I think, of Slaves to Darkness parodying Stormcast, and then the Cultist or Dark Oath parodying cities, kind of. And so it's like, if you're going to do that, if they're going to be the opposite of Stormcast, and some of them look exactly like they used to be Stormcast.
Yeah. Putrid Blight Kings have a 3-up save.
Right.
Like, come on, they have to.
Give them a
3.
They
have to.
Yep. Give them their cool shield, and that's.
I don't want a 4-up save with a +1 to save.
Right.
No, give them 3
Flat
on the sheet.
3.
Come on. Do it.
If you're listening and haven't, you've written it already.
Come on. Change it if you've written it already. It's not that. Change it. Just come on.
Go into the PDF right now. Backspace. 3.
So yes. Anyway, so we've had some exciting ones we've really liked. Like I said, Swamp Orcs look super good. Their rules seemed some of the strongest army rules we've seen so far.
And it surprised me because Swamp Orcs spent their entire life. The Cruel Boys spent their entire 3rd edition life, which is the only edition they've existed. Being kind of mopey.
Yeah. Now I really, really like them.
Yeah.
They're like tricks and ploys and whatever that they use makes them. They're so good.
Yeah,
I'm very excited.
And they've got a surprising amount of mortal damage.
Yeah.
It was up there with like almost ogre-y.
Yeah.
Not as efficient in terms of being just on the charge.
Right.
But their tricks give them a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah. Or just denying the enemy's ability to do mortal wounds. Like there was tons of stuff to make them a little more durable.
They curse the enemy stuff like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Super cool. Really excited about them. So I'm glad they're getting a little bit of a glow up.
Because they're entirely a new aesthetic anyway.
Yeah.
New range of models.
Thinking back to...
Well, what do we have left then? Ironjaw, Slaves, Khorne.
Yep.
Do we know if they're going to do Beast or Bone Splitters? We don't know.
So maybe we're thinking Beast and Bone Splitters are 2 of the 24.
Part of the 24.
Which we might get them. potentially.
Because we know they're still going to exist for a year.
Yep. There's going to be something we're missing. We're not thinking of.
We know tomorrow's Soulblight Gravelords.
Okay.
And so that leaves us...
We've seen Night Haunt already.
That would be...
Right.
We've seen Ossiarch Bone Reapers.
Okay.
That would be 19... Tomorrow would be 19 out of 24.
Yep.
So next week would be the end of it.
Yeah, 5 factions.
So it might... If they do 5...
Right.
It would have to be Khorne, Slaves, Beast, Ossiarch... Or Bone Splitters, if they do them.
Iron Jaws?
And Iron Jaws.
Those 5? Seems weird. Are we not thinking of something? Is there something else we're missing?
No. They've done all the elves.
They did cities.
Wait, did they do Sylvaneth?
They might not have done Sylvaneth yet.
Might not have done Sylvaneth.
Okay.
I don't think
I
they've
don't
done
remember.
Sylvaneth.
I don't think they did. Okay.
So that might still be left.
Interesting. Okay.
But Iron Jaws is the wild card because they used to be a part of one in the 24.
Yeah, so the fact that they split them,
Yeah.
right? They might not be doing Beasts and whatever. They might do the 23rd as Sylvaneth, and then the 24th. Wouldn't it be cool if they did a new one?
Show off a new one
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
Which Chaos Dwarves is one of those
Yep.
rumored additions they're going to
They
be
mentioned
making.
Malarian by name again in a
They
thing
did.
yesterday.
They sure did.
So the Shadow Elves could be.
That would be exciting to see a new faction for 4th that they announced like that.
Just like bam.
Just like right there in the middle. No.
You want to talk about
those.
making up ground,
Yeah,
like for
absolutely.
the 14 disgruntled people about Bone Splitters and Beasts going away? Like, new faction, by the way, boom.
That'd be super cool.
And they don't show any models, though. They just give you rules.
And then we know that there is going to be a second wave of Stormcast. There's going to be a second wave of Skaven, because we had a couple of new models showed off. I think they showed it off because they leaked.
There was a leak.
I think there was a leak of a new model that was not a named character like we were expecting to see, in that there might be a new Vermin Lord, but it was a new Gargantuan, a new Behemoth, a new monster for Skaven that was basically a Rat Ogre plus.
Yeah, he's a
right?
Brood Terror.
Brood Terror is what he was called.
Yeah.
And so he's like a big Frankenstein's monster.
He was like a bipedal.
Looking, and he had like a flail and a flame gauntlet on his one hand, multiple heads with like with little bodies wielding weapons
Yeah,
and
but
stuff.
the detail up close looks so
It was
good.
crazy looking.
Yeah.
It didn't look like a living creature. Call it that. It looked just amalgamation of machine and flesh.
Well, and my first thought of that was Mulder.
Yeah, well, obviously.
The tech looked scry-y.
Yeah.
But it could mean they're leaning heavily into those two clans. And you know what? I'm going to wager that kit is not single build.
Maybe.
I'm going to wager it's got... Maybe it doesn't make another thing. But it could even be like Norn Emissary, Norn Assimilator.
Sure.
Makes two monsters that are similar but do different things. One's maybe a fightier thing and one's maybe a beacon of whatever. So, yeah, we'll see. But
that all but confirms that it's like, yes, there's a second wave coming now then.
Yep.
We know it is.
You guessed right.
I also thought it was really funny that the new character for Stormcast they showed off is a named guy, which exaggerated eye roll.
Yep.
Another named character for Stormcast. But it also makes a generic character. There was one character I had converted up recently for a tournament, the Knight Azeros. I gave him an axe, and he's got his little warding lantern. I never really liked the model, because he made the Venator, too, who had the bow and the hawk.
Yeah.
But the pose was weird. He had those weird, starburst sort of wings that the the prosecutors have. And then the character itself was just awkward, where he's, posed and floating. It was first edition model, but that was on the list of kits being cut. So we're like, oh, well, that's unfortunate, but, this one's going away. I had written up sort of a spreadsheet of what things could be if they were, still wanted to be used in the new edition. And that one was a big question mark. It's like, well, they don't technically have anything analogous to this guy in the new edition so far. Unless they come out with a new model, he's not going to be usable. Well, they came out with the exact model with the exact same name as him.
Yeah.
Right? He is a knight. Shit, what is he? Azeros. There you go. The Knight Azeros. And he looks like, with an updated aesthetic, he does the same thing. He's got a weapon, a fighting melee weapon of some kind, plus that warding lantern. The lantern looks so much better.
Yep.
Just the design of it, just the overall concept.
And the wings continue to be that excellent design.
Exactly. Actual, sort of metallic feather shaped, and then the energy coming off of it.
Yep.
As opposed to the weird spiky...
Starburst wings.
Wings. They're so strange. That was a weird design choice.
It was.
Initially. But yes, there you go. So that guy can be used now. So there's very few things that a year from now are not going to be usable.
Right.
Honestly, like, what a blunder! Making that announcement the way they did was like, that was really dumb.
Well, specifically for
these
Stormcast.
kits, these kits are being removed from our line. How about you wait until you said, hey, here's a new Night Venator we're showing you. By the way, the old Night Venator is going away. Right. This is the new one. Like, that's the time to have done it. You know what I mean? Like, now, at the edition change. It's
In fact, they wouldn't have had to even announce these are going away. They can do what, they've always done when they replace a kit.
Yeah.
Here's a new version of the kit.
Right. So it was such a, like, such a smack in the face for no reason for a lot of players who like, that kind of announcement really turns people off when you just do these sweeping things like, oh, by the way, you spent money on this, you can't use it anymore.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, now that you're upset, you've sold off your army, we give you a replacement. You know, like that.
Which means you could have kept it.
Which could you kept? It's that kind of thing. It's like the gap there was too big. You should have said it sooner. You know, it was just mishandled in my opinion.
And they did also announce they're doing a campaign.
Yep.
At the launch of the edition, like they did with 40K.
Well, they did it with Leviathan, right? Where it's like, choose your side, Space Marines or Skaven.
Right.
Or Space Marines or Tyranids.
Yep.
And report your results. You'll get a code in the box from the starter box if you buy one. Report your side, and it's going to determine the fate, like they did with the fate of a planet.
Who gets their model shown off first.
Who gets a model shown off, and like the fate of a city.
Yep.
So in this one, the city that Hell's Mouth or whatever it's called is an important city to the region. We'll see whether it is defended successfully or if it falls.
Yeah.
And while it might not have that much implication in the overall narrative, it's still fun to see that there's like stakes.
Yep.
You know, stakes to be had,
and
stakes to be made. You know?
They've fleshed out the mortal realms more and more as time has passed, and so now you need to start making people familiar with not only each realm but regions and then even cities.
Right.
Make them matter. Because while I was never a big fan of the old world, they still made things like Altdorf and Mordheim and cities like that matter. And in 40K, obviously, there are sectors and planets and whatever that matter. And so...
But the galaxy is so big that there are billions of planets. Like, who cares if a couple fall?
Yes. And so the mortal realms is big.
Yeah.
And this is a way... And so... pick a thing, and so there's still stakes, but ultimately doesn't change the mortal realms that much.
Right.
But you can still make it matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then when they showed that map, the Skaven have like that entire eastern half of the continent now, kind of.
And so I'm torn, right? Because I want to see the Skaven.
Both armies.
I do have both, and I play both. I want to see the Skaven models first.
Yes.
However, story-wise, I want to see the city survive. So it's kind of a juxtaposition of like conflicting desires on my behalf.
Sexy thriller.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what do I do. I might flip a coin. I might play a game and see what happens.
You know, someone in a hooded cloak might come to you and offer you a way for both sides to win, and you think you're getting the upper hand, and before you know it, you are half rat, half tech, half man.
I'd take it.
3 halves.
That'd be cool.
Yep.
It's superior, in my opinion.
Superior species.
That's an upgrade. That's a paddling.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm thinking it's super cool. Again, I continue to be just impressed with what I see for the new edition. I know there's a lot of excitement going on for it.
Yeah.
The fact that they announced the actual release date was exciting. I don't know if you noticed the cheeky little thing that they did there, though. It releases on the 13th. Skaven number, 13. I thought that was pretty clever. I think it was pretty good. I also hope that this it kind of fires off more interest in the game and more, I don't know, maybe even more avenues for the IP, right? Because we've had a few times where they've gotten licensed to do a video game for the
even a AAA title.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it just really hasn't landed. Call it. I really like the VR game where you're playing a sacrosanct wizard, Rip, fighting against ghosts. I thought that was fun. I get super sick in VR. It's like it kind of stinks. I wish I could play more VR. I can't. I get sick. I get motion sickness. We had a couple of like sort of turn-based sort of games that just didn't really feel great. They felt very mobile game, which I just don't care two shits for mobile gaming.
No.
But it was on the PC, I don't want like a Talisman or a Grand Strategy type game where you're doing cities. The closest thing we had was Realms of Ruin, and it was one of those things where it's like they didn't plan it to be a single player game. They wanted it to be multiplayer.
Yeah.
And so many games I feel like fall flat because they're just like, well, let's gear it up so people can play it for years to come. It's like, you know what? Why don't you focus on this year to come?
Yeah.
Like, make it playable and last a little bit longer.
Now, I might not have my finger on the pulse of the video game community anymore, but I feel like a recipe for success that is tried and true is like when you make the game great for the player right up front, you can then always add the ability to play online after.
Yeah.
That gives the game longevity after the solo play has lost replayability, the graphics are starting to show their age, whatever.
Right.
Now you can just make it so there's these online modes where they have to put in no effort. They just make skins and patches.
Yeah.
And like, instead...
Or even if it's for single player, right? You patch it and you release challenges where it's a single player map and now you have to, you got metrics you have to do where you have to like, do it in this amount of time, do it with this without losing any units, do it with like challenge modes. Things like that can absolutely make a game last longer. But the game was fun, but it was on like 80% discount 2 months after release.
Yeah.
That tells you something.
Yep.
It's kind of a shame. I liked the game a lot.
Yep.
I really did. I thought it was kind of my style of RTS, where it wasn't twitchy, wasn't micro intensive. It was kind of like, well, let's see what happens.
It was almost real time, turn based in the sense that it was like, I mean, you had to issue the commands and then the animation would do it, kind of regardless of what you did, but you still had also just like right click move control.
Right.
But yeah, it was almost like how Final Fantasy combat works.
Sure, a little bit.
With a little bit of RTS.
Yeah.
Now, I thought the concept of it was good, but yeah, by not spending that much effort on the single player mode because they're thinking we're going to turn this into another Fortnite and make it so just a bunch of people are playing online forever. And when that's the first angle, I know that jackpot has to be too tempting for game companies, but they've missed an opportunity to make a good game with that IP.
Yeah.
And that's just it.
It sullies people on the IP a little bit.
It does, and that's just it. The Age of Sigmar world itself is so cool. The models are so cool. The game is so good. They need the video games to jump on board.
Yeah. How are you fucking this up with dragons?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, dudes can ride dragons. That should be enough, right? Dragons make everything cooler.
You have dragons. You have demons. You have skeletons. You have paladins.
Yeah.
You have orcs.
All this.
You have
It's got the good recipe.
Yeah.
They'll do it well. I still think Battle Sector was my favorite Warhammer game of recent years. Battle Sector was so good, but single player.
Yeah.
I didn't want to play multiplayer and play against people. I don't care. I don't give a shit about that. I don't need to prove myself against someone else. I like to take my time and play at my speed against the AI.
If they want proof that a single player mode done right can revive or elongate a Warhammer universe, I go back to like Vermintide.
Yeah.
And Total War.
Yeah. Hell, even Dawn of War 2.
Yep. But I mean, with those two, you took an actually canceled tabletop game.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we have the IP for it. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
They developed the hell out of the video games. And they ended up so good.
Yep.
And instead, and it actually brought the tabletop game back.
You know what they should have done? You know what they should have done? Damn it. They should have used this opportunity of launching this edition to do Vermintide 3. But set it in the Mortal Realms.
Yep.
Right?
Are you listening, GW?
Jesus. Get your head out of your ass. You know what I mean? But like coinciding with this, Skaven were the protagonist. Make them the protagonist. Make them the good guys. Switch it up.
Play from their perspective.
That would be hilarious. They are actually developing a mode for Vermintide 2 where they are doing that.
I mean, to talk about gray area, is there a gray area more so than Skaven?
No, they're evil.
The Grey Seers?
No, they're evil. They're
see gray.
Yeah, they're not good. No, they're not good guys.
They get in everybody's way, though, is the thing.
True.
And so it's like...
Neutral evil.
Do it from their perspective and make them deal with that their own betray them.
That would be hilarious. That would be really funny. You're playing as the protagonists, as Skaven, and throughout the level, you're fighting humans and whatever, trying to stop you. And then there's a a backstab event where you have to fight other Skaven that are trying to take your glory. That would be actually really funny.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And while I had hoped that Creative Assembly with Total War was looking at Age of Sigmar because a rumor had sprouted like 5 years ago that they were, a lot of things are changing at Creative Assembly. And then they've announced some spoilers of what's coming next. And they're doing a 40K one, 100% for sure. And I guess it's actually closer to being done than we thought. They're doing historical. Their next historical one is supposed to be World War One, but that's a ways away. And then they got the license to do one for Star Wars, but they haven't started it. So people geeked out because Star Wars, I still think, is the most overrated sci-fi universe in existence. But 40K Total War, I'll play it. I'm sure I will. Now, totally off topic here. Is it though? But when I've played Total War, I've played them all the way back to the original Medieval 1, Rome 1, Medieval 2, Samurai, or Shogun.
Yeah.
And it was like, I tend to prefer like the pre-gunpowder age stuff. Mm-hmm. Warhammer was the exception because it was in a universe that I liked. They made it better than the tabletop game. Mm-hmm. And it has literally endless replayability, but it's still fantasy. Right. Even though there's things that fire.
Magic bows are still as strong as a gun.
Right. And so when they announced, that they're doing World War One, I was like, I didn't really like Empire and Napoleon Total War because it was gunpowder age, and now they're doing just trench warfare. And then
so it's just guns against guns.
It's World War One. That's one of them. Yeah.
There wasn't.
Yeah. And
so you cut out your cavalry, cut out your dedicated melee.
There was cavalry in World War One. There was. Mm-hmm.
I know they did use wooden ships in World War One. I remember that.
U-boats.
But horses?
They did. They used horses for the early part of World War II.
That's wild.
Now, they didn't last long.
Okay. Because
there would be killing fields of literally the soldiers marching through wheat fields where there was just hundreds of dead horses, and so they realized what a cost that was. But in World War I, they still used them a lot. They would have guns and swords, or like rapiers or whatever, but they weren't...
Sabers?
Or sabers.
Sabers,
but,
yeah, I think.
But the cavalry weren't what we think of. They weren't the tanks of the day. They didn't charge in and break the line. It was more just like mobility than anything.
I do remember hearing about the Polish, even in World War II, attacking tanks on horseback with swords, and it just not working.
Nope. But you still had the remnants of like the Ottomans in World War One, and they still had some of that, and the British had some of that. But either way. Trench warfare on a European map. Okay. I mean, every Total War game has almost universally been on a European map, with the exception of like Shogun, right? Yeah. And
Japan is so small. It was such a weird game.
And so I'm not surprised they had to pick another era.
Yeah.
But I had really hoped that Age of Sigmar would be one they'd look into, especially when it was like when three went so well and the sales were going well, and now we've got 4 coming. It's like, man. But we don't even know what Creative Assembly's future looks like right now, because there was something about them being sold, possibly, so I don't know. I would love to see them do a Mortal Realms one, because that map system would be super unique. They could set it on one world or what. Those continents are crazy. Mm-hmm. But the factions you would have access to. Who wouldn't love to play Caradrons? We've got balloons and ships.
Sharks and turtles?
Yeah, floating in midair, mind you. Yeah. And what those spells would look like. Yeah. And then how their endless spells would be different than Total War Warhammer Fantasy spells. Yeah. One thing they've done with themselves, though, is because of what Total War's done in terms of variety and replayability, it has spoiled their historical lineup. Spoiled in the bad sense. Like, now people can't find that replayability going back to just humans fighting humans doing human things. Mm-hmm. And so they tried to change that when they did, like, Three Kingdoms. They gave the heroes abilities that were almost like superpowers, and then when they would fight, it would be like this cut scene of them like duking it out. It just didn't take, though. And so now they have to just keep every idea they have to throw it into Warhammer. And so I imagine that's why 40K and Star Wars are on the tables. They can keep doing ridiculous things.
Because really those games or those settings are kind of more fantasy than they are sci-fi. Yeah. Honestly.
So it would work. While the technology in 40K is obviously sci-fi, the mood and the themes are very gothic fantasy. Yeah. And the 40K universe itself is becoming large enough that it's starting to breach out of just the Warhammer fans. Yeah. And so, I don't know, they could get a ton of playability out of that. I mean, think of the faction packs they'll do. Think of the expansions they could do just for different sectors of the galaxy.
Pretty extensive library of stuff to be able to pull from too.
Will that make me stop playing Total War Warhammer? I don't know.
Absolutely, I don't think so.
I know we at least have 2 more years of content of Total War Warhammer that they're going to support. So,
all right. I know the one is very Chinese themed, Monkey King esque.
So people are wondering if they were just dropping rumors to see what the. Now we know we've seen the Dogs of War and the Monkey King referenced in the source code, but the other rumors were more Cathay expansions, which befuddled people. But it was based on 2 premises. One was they were going to do 3 Kingdoms 2, and their surveys or testing didn't show well, so they're well, let's just keep doing this in Warhammer then. So we'll add 2, and they were and they were going to do Ind, the cult of Ind in Warhammer, which were tiger people when you read some of the very rare, obscure fluff that exists in Warhammer.
Right.
At the very least, tiger themes. Well, they decided instead of making Ind its own faction, because it is a section on the map, they're nope, we're just going to expand it to Grand Cathay, but they'll be tiger people. Okay. So these were rumors. We don't know if it's 100% true yet. But I'll obviously get every DLC for the game.
Of course.
And play every faction.
Yeah.
I'm not. Are you loyal to one faction? You're mostly Empire, aren't you?
I like Empire a lot. I can't help it. I can't help it. I do like the Gatling gun, because it's kind of it's familiar.
Are really good now.
It's familiar, right? It's humans versus evil, right? Which is very relatable. I think it's these aren't some obscure faction that you don't know their motivations. You can't relate to their motivations. It's just people trying to fight off evil. You play as the Beastmen. It's that was fun, but I can't get behind them. I don't know why they're doing this. They just want to do it. No, that's not enough.
They're just destroying and eating flesh.
I don't know. So humans, though, I can understand.
Yep.
And it's always it's always a civil war, which I'm familiar with.
Yep.
Combined with then diplomacy, and then fighting off the bad guys. So I don't know. And then their rosters are always so wide that it's you can play any way you want to with Empire. They have everything available. They've got monsters, they got flying things, they got melee, they got speed,
shooting,
they got everything. Yep. If you want to go knight heavy, there's all kinds of unique knight variants you can get throughout the Empire. Yep. I like it. I don't know. It's always interesting to me. And then they always change it, right? Choose a different legendary lord for Empire, and you get access to new things. But it's still Empire. It's still familiar. So, you do the Collegiate Arcana, you do Balthazar Gelt's new thing.
Go all magic.
Super cool. He sucked before. He was so bad before. Oh my god, he was so bad. But then they changed him and they fixed him.
Well, his campaign mechanics sucked.
Yeah.
He on his own was always randomly good because he could get his metal spells down to 0 cost.
In the right army, right? If you wanted to win, you didn't just play Gelt. You'd played Gelt plus the things that synergized with him.
Lots of Outriders.
Yeah, yep. Outriders.
But he could get Gehenna's Hounds and the whatever.
Transmutation of Lead.
Well, what's
to
the
slow
shard
him down,
one?
And then
it's one of the first spells.
Something shards, molten shards.
But
something.
He could basically get him down to where they cost no winds of magic, and so in the campaign he could just run around kind of by himself, killing armies. But that aside, Age of Sigmar would have been great. I would have loved to seen that, or some AAA title come alongside 4th edition.
I don't even see why, how it could be difficult to implement it. You've already got the frameworks, you got the bones already.
Yep.
It's just the same thing, really, as fantasy, but
you could really do
more.
It. But you just got a new map, you've got new skins, updated graphics.
Yeah, that's it. There's nothing groundbreaking there. There's nothing new they'd have to add.
In fact, you know what they could have done is they could have just kept it the same title, even Total War Warhammer, Age of Sigmar.
Yeah. Total War Warhammer, 40K.
Yeah,
right.
You can even call it 4, and then, which I don't even think Warhammer should have been called 1, 2, and 3. These should have just been expansions to the game.
Because they didn't. They released new games, but they were just the same game. Except there was a weird thing that happened within, was it 1 and 2, where they when they released Norska for 1, they failed to release Norska for 2.
It didn't work in 2,
which is which I still to this day have trouble wrapping my head around.
There was someone explained it, although I forgot it. I might because I'm 2 drinks in, but there was some code issue with the way 2 functioned as opposed to 1, where they just didn't work.
Well, then they eventually did import them.
They eventually got
them. They were 4 editions or 4 patches behind in terms of what stats and rules they had. So they didn't even try to import the newest version of Norska. They did an old version, and then it was you fixed all this stuff in later.
In 1.
Fix it now. And then it took them 8 months.
Yeah.
It was absurd. It was
Yep.
How does that happen? Like, you have the framework. It's basically the same game. How did you not be able to do it?
Because all they did is just expand the maps. Like,
yeah, it was really funny. Whatever happened there, it spaghettified the code.
Yeah.
And, like, somehow it just didn't work. Yeah.
And, yeah. But I digress. Now that they are 1, 2, and 3, they could have done that, though. It'd been like Total War Warhammer 4, Age of Sigmar, Total War Warhammer 4, 40K.
Yeah.
Like, just keep that same name and just...
Yep. Yeah.
But in fact, they could have even set it up so that it releases like 1 year after they do whenever they do end times.
Sure.
You have the end times, give it its replayability time frame, a couple patches, and then it's like, boom, you launch AOS.
Yep. Because that's kind of how it works,
and you
right?
even have the story open with like the ending.
Yeah.
So AOS 4.
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking about that, how they would do that with like Archaon and stuff. Anyway, yes, AOS 4. So I'm gearing up for it, obviously, with dusting off some models.
Yep.
There's some new models and some old ones that I'm working on. What are you working on for it?
Well, I got most of my Slaves to Darkness assembled.
Yep.
So I can play something.
Which includes Abraxia.
She's got some blue tack on her, but she's together.
Some Varangard.
I have 3 and 3 custom ones left.
Okay.
To make.
Okay.
Because remember I bought those Draco lines that I like.
Right. Yeah.
I was but we didn't know when Abraxia was coming out at the time. Now I feel stupid buying him. But he gave me such a huge deal. He cut him like way off.
Yeah.
So it was like, maybe I'll convert him still. 9 Varangard, nothing wrong with that, right? But and then my Maggot-kin are already together. Yeah. I still have like some Puskoils maybe to assemble, but the Maggot-kin's kind of a small roster. I still have to assemble my Rotmire Creed.
Those little guys?
They're staying. Yeah. Otherwise, as far as the painting side goes, I've been trying stuff with slaves. I'm on my 4th model, right? No, 3rd. I painted a single chosen. I painted a demon prince. And now I've started work on that exalted hero on foot.
Well, technically, you also did your Wilder Fiend.
I did do the I did do the Wilder.
So
Fiend.
I get what you're saying is in terms of we've separated them in our heads, right? Dark Oath are separate from the Slaves of Darkness. Slaves of Darkness are Chaos Warriors and the Chosen. That type of style.
Although they'll be in the same army,
right? Yes. Whereas the Dark Oath are the Barbarian Humans, which are very aesthetically different from the Chaos Warriors.
Love them both, though. Yeah. In my first 2 attempts, maybe I shouldn't have chosen a Chosen and a Demon Prince to start. Because I just wasn't that happy with how they turned out. But with this Exalted Hero on foot, well, the Wilder Fiend went okay, and that was just a simple oil wash method, and it looks fine. This Exalted Hero on foot, though, is starting to go pretty well, and I did something far simpler. I literally primed it, laid down an airbrush on the cape, and then did, I guess, one of the best dry brushes I've ever done.
Okay.
That was so simple for the metal, but it literally got on nothing else except what I wanted it to. Was just in the zone, I guess. Turned out super clean, highlighted it just the way I wanted it. And then in areas that were going to be not silver, all I did then was took some snakebite leather contrast paint, a little bit of contrast medium, and like a dot of sienna ink, and put it in the areas, and it made this interesting red gold kind of look. Just stained it a touch. But that I didn't show. I only showed the picture after the dry brush step. But like, it turned out so simple, so clean, and it's like, that's all I wanted. And this is like, I don't even think I have to do an oil wash with this guy now. I can just do this, pick out details and highlight, and then as a tabletop hero guy, he's going to be set.
What color metal is your guy? Besides the goldish, brownish, reddish gold?
It is well, the trim areas that are like Chaos Stars have the goldish thing. Yeah. Rest of it's silver and black. But it turned out so clean and kind of soft with edges the way I want. And the cape is that vibrant purple thing going on.
Okay.
But it's like, well, he turned out, that's how I want the stuff to look.
And you still have an Archaon. I
still have an Archaon.
Assembled?
I do have a Caricadrack that I painted like 2 years ago.
Do you still is Archaon assembled at least?
He's assembled. Rider is not attached to base.
So you can paint him eventually.
Yep. I mean, so here's the thing. It's weird because when I think of the way I like to paint and the fact that Archaon is like the centerpiece of centerpieces.
He is one of the biggest AOS models. Yeah. He really is.
He's an enormous kit. But it's like, I also know I'm not entering him in a competition. Mm-hmm. So now I want to think this tabletop method I'm working on these other models for, when I find it, I can then, if it is as quick as I'm thinking, I can then get to someone like him and it won't seem like the daunting task, other than however many times I have to refill the airbrush cup to prime him. Mm-hmm. Like to get multiple coats of black primer on him or whatever. But I've been happy with, I think, what I'm finding with this third one. So now I have to decide how far I want to take highlights up. If I want to do an oil wash at all, I might not need to. The oil wash. So for any of you out there who've experimented with the oil wash on miniatures, it's hit and miss for me already, even though I'm only 3 models into it. So whenever you watch content creators do it, who are really proficient with it, Marco Frazzoni is an example. He does it all the time. They'll mix up that little oil wash on their tin palette, and they'll start applying it, and it coats it, looks like magic, and then it dries, and he takes his little makeup sponges and he erases it, and then that's the magic, is once he's erasing stuff, it all of a sudden, the bright is bright, the dark is dark. It's wonderfully homogenized in terms of its blend from light to dark. It's soft, it's rich. It's like, man, that is fantastic. Then I heard Trevelyan talk about his experience with oil washes, and he was like, he saw the same thing, and he went to use it, and he's like, well, I got it to do that part, to settle in the crevices real nice, no surface tension. Then I'd go to do the erase thing, and it's like, it just doesn't look clean, or you erased it too soon, or you waited too long, and then you have to add white spirits, and then if you reactivate acrylic, you can pull some off, and it just, then at the end, when I got to the end of my Chosen and my Demon Prince, it was like, they're just so kind of like muddy looking. And I didn't really want that. I do love how easy it lets you panel line everything. You get recess shades so easily with the oil without having to worry about aiming it. But that part, that cleanup step, that gets you that nice soft highlight to dark, rich, smooth, I haven't been able to get that.
Now, do you think they're doing something like that? Like the timing is perfect, or are they dampening the cotton swab with something that they're not?
So I've seen that they prefer. So there are sponge swabs and sponge wedges that you use because the cotton fibers will absolutely come off in the oil.
Okay.
Even if it's dried for hours.
Sure.
Those cotton fibers come off and they stay on there, and then you're fighting that. The sponges, when I used it, where I let it like sit for hours, and then other times where I let it sit for like an hour, that hasn't seemed to make a huge difference. If it is still too wet, it will just move it around instead of remove it. And then I tried it both dry and damp. I did both. The Demon Prince was really where I went to town because he's got some larger surfaces. But it's just like the after effect. I'm either not doing enough pre-shading or pre-highlighting to take advantage of it, or it's just looks better on camera. And it could be a combination of the two, actually. And if you have to do that much work to pre-light it before you do the oil wash, well, like you're already gone that far. I mean, you could just use a contrast paint or an enamel even, which has no surface tension, and you could shade into the recesses and get that lining you want. Because there are companies now that make enamels for miniature painting, and those, you don't have to mix with anything. You literally touch that brush, that recess shade, and it's like, whoop, and it zips up the thing, if that's what you want. To get that nice soft thing.
Haven't cracked it yet. If it's even possible.
I haven't been able to get it quite yet. Like, there's parts of the Demon Prince's wings that look like that, but I still think, well, man, I could have pre-lit some of the highlighted areas more and then done it and seen if that gives that more soft but dramatic blend. Because then on like the skin, all it really did was flatten it out. The lines are lined, a brown-black kind of thing. I think on armor panels it works okay. But I found with like the Chosen, I didn't like the finished look of it just straight over metal. And so I went in with just like Pterodon Turquoise, Black Legion, and contrast medium and just like did it over the panel. And I was like, oh, that's what I wanted, was that. And so, I don't know. I know the oil's really durable once it dries. That's an advantage of it. But so far, I haven't been able to nail it. And with this guy, I might not have to. If I find a quick method to get him where I want, just like the Lord on Carcadrack, I didn't do an oil wash for that. That was simpler methods. And so the post I did on Instagram today was about not forgetting the simpler methods.
Right. That's key, right? It's like, just because you unlock a new skill, right? Think of like a skill tree in a video game, right? It's like, just because you unlocked a more advanced skill, maybe that skill costs too much MP, and you need to use a simpler one that still does an effective job at,
Well, and the other thing to consider is that as you become practiced and as you develop your skills, you can go back and do the simpler ones better than you used to. And so when I tackled that
dry like Diablo 2 style skill tree, I have higher points in my
Blizzard or whatever.
Right, and then it improves my ice bolt.
Yep. And so I went back and did that dry brush just on the shield, which is what I showed, and it was like, it came out so clean, there were no streaks anywhere, and it was like a combination of doing stuff for basing, doing Artis Opus style dry brushing with the dampening pad, and then this, it was like I did an old style but took a good brush and just it was also learning Richard Gray's method, because he'll paint with a tiny 00 where his brush is barely touching the model, and he'll just do thousands of micro scratches where the brush is touching like a feather, not to be confused with the technique of feathering. But I did that with the dry brush, and it just barely caught everything I wanted. It was like, I don't want to mess with this. I don't want to put an oil wash on it and knock it all back. So I just thinned down some contrast with a dab of ink and got the color I wanted. And because the ink will, when you thin ink, it'll go wherever you want it also, which is kind of nice. The acrylic inks, I don't know how traditional inks behave, but yeah. So if I can do that and get some pretty looking tabletop stuff, because
also quickly.
Quickly. Because it's like, if I can replicate it on him, I can take the smaller and slightly less complicated warriors and chosen, do that to them, and then it's not such a task. The one thing I haven't tried yet is just the Dark Oath humans, because
I think you've got skin under lock.
I do, but I haven't tried the simpler methods on them. So skin I'm very comfortable painting, but I love painting it, so I have to make sure I don't overpaint it. So I think the trick there is going to be finding a quick method to get the bodies and legs done, and then spend a touch of time on the face.
You could try with that, doing...
and maybe the oil wash works real well on there.
Maybe a Sergio Calvo, right, method. The blocking in color and then airbrushing with the blend on the skin. I mean, you could attempt to...
They're pretty little, but yeah.
But, I mean, you have a nice airbrush now that has a very fine stream.
It does.
You could potentially try to do that. Because there is a very quick... effective method using the airbrush and then it's undercoat, overcoat.
And you basically do like a base coat, and then you jump several steps of the highlight, and then you use a between or even the highlight color thinned with the airbrush, and you can homogenize it, which is super cool. I think it especially lends itself to larger figures and busts.
For sure.
But I can try that on those Dark Oath. The other thing is, like I said, if I can do a quick method for most of their body, and then you just spend a touch of time on the face, because that's where you want people to look anyway.
Right.
It'll look like it's painted to a much higher standard than it is. And that's what I wanted. And I felt like with my first few models, I wasn't getting there. Is if this is going to be a painted army that I take to something, I want it to look eye-catching across the table and not dull. And my first couple of I might be doing it wrong. My first couple of attempts at oil washing, it ended up looking dull. So...
Well, there's something to be said about...
And I bought good oils. I bought like artist grade.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said about just an army being fully painted, too. That just makes it look better. Right?
It does.
Like, if you have 95% of your army painted, it 100% painted army doesn't look 5% better.
Right.
It looks way better. When it's all completely based, it's all completely, the same color scheme. I did one for Adepticon earlier this year, that was very, very quick painted to the same standard with some cheaty techniques to really highlight some of the highlights and make them really stand out. And tons of compliments. People walking by but like, whoa, that kind of thing. Whoa, love that cape. And I'm like, it's two colors. Yeah. It's literally red and orange, but applying it the right way, do it consistently across all the models. There is something that unlocks when you see the whole army is all painted, to a high degree, a decently high degree.
When it's all to the same standard within itself. Well, so I was asked to be one of the painting judges at an event that took place in a high school gym earlier this year. And I didn't know I was going to be judging it, but I showed up to see the results, and then they asked me. And I'm walking around and looking, and there was a lot of drab, a lot of flat, a lot of single coat wash or contrast at the end. And then there were 3 armies in particular, maybe 4, where they went just even 2 steps farther. That immediately made them stand out. And then when we were narrowing it down to that, it was, well, these 2 armies just simply haven't finished all their models. And so even if model per model they looked better than the other 2, when you saw a full army painted on its display board, there's just something about that.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to make that look really bad, but it was well, you picked some contrasting colors, you did more than just one step, and you've got them all painted.
Right.
That goes so far to make it art. And so I was like, I kind of want that. It'll be harder because Dark Oath increases the body count of a Slaves to Darkness army a lot because they're going to be cheap. But as I keep trying to hone in one model at a time what my speed method will be, that was exciting with this Exalted Hero to see some okay, this was really quick. This took no effort. I didn't have to think about the process. I didn't have to dig out a bunch of colors. I didn't have to do a bunch of in-between things. Just go. And And so it's just possible that I don't regret buying the oil paints. I'm still going to try oil washes in the future to figure them out. Maybe they'll work better on like my Tyranids. Maybe they work better with organic things than they do with super armory things. But
maybe I thought armor was the perfect thing to use them on.
And
you know
I've seen
I mean?
people do both.
Yeah.
And sometimes with armor, because you watch it do that clean panel line like it does, and it did do that. When I used it, it did absolutely do that. It was just what it did to the surface. I wasn't getting what I was seeing other people do. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that rich.
Well, I'm going to make this whole thing brown with oil wash. Yeah. Let it dry. When I come back in here with 12 different Q-tips.
Yep.
And then I do this. Look how perfect it is. It's like, neat. I want to try that. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And so it's like, I wonder if there's just more pre-steps you got to do. Mm-hmm. I also think
maybe there's something to do with the sealing that we've been kind of poo-pooing on, because there was a varnish step that you do on your acrylic paint to seal it before you apply an oil wash. Yep. Maybe that does do something to the surface. Maybe that protects it and lets the oil come off easier without tinting.
So when I did that with the Chosen.
Okay. And still did.
I gloss varnished him first.
Damn.
Or satin one of the two, but finished it. Because that does a couple things. You smooth the surface so the oil, I guess, runs smoother. And so nothing was coming up. Obviously, nothing came up when I didn't seal it, but it wasn't diffused and textured. It was smooth. And it got to that part where I was removing it, but I actually just think so much of his detail is so small and together that there was a chance that makeup sponge would just catch stuff even in the recesses because they were very shallow, and it would pick it up. So maybe it works better actually on a bigger model. Like when Marco Frazzoni did it on his Usharan, it was stunning. He went to that great big cape, which has a million folds and surface areas, and he airbrushed some dramatic steps. He went all the way, he started at like a purple and went all the way up to like a yellow, and it seemed odd, but then he mixed this magenta and black kind of oil wash and went over it, and it like blended it all together. And he goes back in with the sponge, and it was nice and soft, and the recesses stayed shaded, remained shaded. And like, so that was like, okay, I get that concept. And so when I went to try it on the Chosen, I just like couldn't get that effect. But a lot of his detail's tight also, so maybe it's just hard to see the dramatic result. So I thought on the Demon Prince I'll get a little more, and like I said, some of it showed up on the wings, but on the rest of him I just like still just looks kind of muddy, and no pop really to him outside of like his eyes and axe are glowing, but like that had nothing to do with the oil. That was just that was ink and fluorescent and orange or whatever. Like
weird. Well, we'll have to try that more and see if we can get some better results.
It worked okay in the Wilder Fiend. Like he worked out all right, you know, but. I also like tried to be a little more dramatic on those steps with him. And so maybe that's it. A lot of pre-steps, which again, I feel like once you get so far in the pre-steps, it's like, well, you're this far, you might as well just finish it.
Yeah, right.
Using acrylic paint.
Well, I skipped acrylic because that's more work, right? I wash it and I can do this work of cleaning it. I'll just finish it. Yeah.
But the experimentation is key. I like learning this stuff. I like knowing.
Yeah.
And having the oils around, like I said, there could be projects where it's useful anyway, but there's also like freehand work for things like banners I've seen people do, where oils are really useful because you have a long dry time. And so you can freehand stuff and not worry about if you messed it up. You know, it's pretty easy to manipulate.
Yeah, that I'd be interested in trying, because I'm horrible with that. Because it's always like, my paint's drying too fast on a banner. I can't really freehand the way I want.
Yeah, and then it's set where you didn't want it. Now you got to clean it up and then go back over it.
Absolutely. And then I end up like doing my highlights and I cover up some of it. It's just like...
At least with the softer parts of detail. So, like, I think if you're trying to do a stained glass style, you need really sharp edges and everything, and the acrylic's fine for that. But it's like, if you're going to do if you want to create a setting, like you got one of those cool tarot model maker plinths that's got a backdrop on it, and you want to paint a landscape in the background, the oil paint, I think, would be great to set that up.
Well, that's about all the time we got. If you have any thoughts about oil painting, something we're missing that you're not, hearing us talk about.
We started today talking about the New Age of Sigmar, but if you've got oil painting thoughts and you've tried it,
let us know. Let us know if something we can try to get better results, or if you're interested in Age of Sigmar for a different reason than we've talked about, or have seen something we haven't. Ooh,
if you've got tips.
Yeah, I'm excited about all of it.
You excited to jump in? You excited to play Spearhead?
Spearhead, I think it looks super cool.
Yeah.
I think I own several Spearheads.
Yeah.
That without buying the Spearhead boxes.
I think the last Nurgle thing I got was technically the current Spearhead.
Yeah. So that's funny. But yeah, let us know in the comments, and obviously let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you want to hear us talk about something specific.
we're open for that too. New topics is always a great thing. We rehash some of the same stuff over and over again sometimes.
We do.
So,
and this was, I know this veered into like a little different because we were talking about video games and then cooking with oil.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Check out our new episodes every Friday on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible, or on Podbean. You can also follow myself and Llama on Instagram for more. We are at Hyena Paints Minis and at Llama Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.